It was a moment of madness, said Neil Parish. Well, two moments of madness, in fact, when he admits that he was watching pornography on his mobile phone in the House of Commons. But that doesn't make him a misogynist, according to the former MP and according to his wife. It's been a difficult day, as you can imagine, for his family. And earlier today, I spoke to Mr Parish's wife as we were waiting for the MP to make that statement. Now, Mrs Parish didn't want to come on camera, but she said to me that her husband had been extremely silly, but she said that watching pornography doesn't make anybody a misogynist. And she said that there may be many men who are watching porn in the privacy of their own offices. But of course, this wasn't in private. This was in a very public place of work, a place of work that has a very significant, a particular significance in the nation, the House of Commons. And today, Neil Parish admits that he was watching porn there, and in the end, he had no choice but to step down.
So what has been the reaction locally?
Well, many people that I've spoken to here say that it was inevitable. They were waiting for him to step down. And I think this is one of those stories that illustrates very perfectly what people say when they mean there's a disconnect between Westminster, the Westminster bubble, and people living their normal lives in the day-to-day world away from that bubble. Because so many people said, come on, if I was caught watching porn at work, I would instantly be disciplined. And yet MPs are allowed to say, let's wait for the outcome of this inquiry. Let's see if rules had technically been broken. There was also anger amongst Mr Parish's own party colleagues, and I understand from his wife that's partly what led to his resignation, because there was anger at the way he had handled it, initially keeping quiet, even giving a television interview in which he had talked about how disgraceful it was that somebody had been caught watching porn, not admitting that he was that very person. There's also a concern that the local elections are coming up. And within the party, there has been anger at the way women generally have been treated and a huge discussion about sexism and misogyny. And I think in the end, all these issues came together and Neil Parish realised himself, despite insisting over the last 24 hours or so when he was speaking to reporters that he wouldn't be resigning, I think this morning he woke up and finally realised that he had no choice but to go.
Mr Parish, did you watch porn in the Commons? Did you watch porn in the Commons?
There was no escaping the questions. Ever since being named as the man accused of watching porn in the Commons, Neil Parish had been insisting he'd remain an MP while his conduct was investigated. But his wife told us that after realising the headlines weren't going away, and after speaking to friends, he couldn't go on. As he left for a haircut, this is what he told Channel 4 News.
But I will be speaking to the media.
And are you going to continue with your work and continue with your job chairing the Select Committee?
I suggest you wait and see until this afternoon.
The MP has represented Tiverton and Honiton in Devon since 2010. He also runs the family farm. In a statement, he says he'd first watched the porn accidentally when he'd been looking at tractors online.
Funnily enough, it was tractors that I was looking at, and so I did get into another website that had a sort of very similar name. And I watched it for a bit, which I shouldn't have done. But my biggest crime, is that on another occasion I went in a second time.
And that was deliberately?
That was deliberate.
And was that in the Select Committee or in the Commons chamber?
That was sitting, waiting to vote. In the end, I could see the furore, the damage I was causing my family and my constituency. An association just wasn't worth carrying on.
Will that damage extend to next week's local elections? There's been anger amongst some of Mr Parish's colleagues over the way the story has been handled by his party. Tory officials had refused to suspend the whip for more than 48 hours. For some people, the row over whether rules had technically been broken missed the point.
If anyone else, normal person, done that anywhere, they wouldn't have a job anymore. If you were working for a factory or wherever you work, if you were doing that, you would get in trouble.
What, accidentally watching porn? Yeah, it happens to everyone, don't it? Not.
I would say it's an institution that is very much in the past, and opportunities for women are just not where they should be in the 21st century.
The way women are treated in the Commons has been debated since the story broke, with a huge row about misogyny and calls for the Prime Minister to take the concerns of women more seriously. But Mr Parish and his family told us that watching the porn didn't mean he was sexist.
Mrs. Parish told me that her husband had been extremely silly, but she stressed that he's not a misogynist. She told me that the MP hadn't realised there were women around when he was watching the porn, and he certainly didn't do it, she said, to make his female colleagues feel uncomfortable.
Mr. Parish said today when he had watched porn at work, it had been a moment of madness, a moment that has led to a spectacular slide from grace.
Well, joining me now is Margot James, a minister under Theresa May. She stood down as an MP in 2019, around the same time that a number of senior female Tory MPs also left the Commons. Margot James, do you think he resigned because of watching the pornography, or because this was just causing so much embarrassment for the party?
Well, I haven't spoken to Neil, obviously, about this, so I can't, explain his decisions. But I would imagine that he realised after some reflection that the furore was not going to go away, and that it would be very damaging to him, his family, and his constituents were he to carry on and go through some investigation process that always takes too long and would probably, in the end, find what he did to be an offence for which, withdrawing the whip and being recalled would probably have resulted. And I'm sure that he found the pressure, the media scrutiny, pretty unbearable over the last 24 hours as well, since he was named.
I mean, he talks about a moment of madness. Would you describe it as an act of stupidity, or would you, as some are suggesting, that it's indicative of this blokey culture where he sits and he thinks, well, I can do this because nothing's going to happen, it's fine. He doesn't see what's wrong with it.
I found the explanation that he gave in the interview with BBC South very credible, in fact. I think it is a reflection.
The idea he was looking for tractors?
Well, he did admit that he went back to the site a second time deliberately whilst waiting to vote in the chamber. So he was not denying that he visited a pornography site with the intention to view the material in the chamber that he has admitted to. And I find it a believable set of events. And I think, oddly, he is not somebody that I would associate with the normal sort of misogynistic, the people who are like that in the Commons, who are dismissive of rights and concerns of women and so forth, and who promote the laddish culture, which undoubtedly exists in elements of the Commons. I wouldn't put Neil Parish in that category, in fact. But that category does exist, and it's too pervasive. And I'm glad that women, particularly in the Conservative Party, are now speaking out and saying they've had enough of it and it's got to change. And it must change. And
women have been speaking out about it. I just wonder, it was said that by Tuesday, senior members of the party knew who this MP was, and yet the whip was only removed yesterday. That in itself perhaps suggests that these things are not being taken properly by the party.
Yes, I quite agree. I think that missing 48 hours or however long it was is inexplicable. I suspect it was down to the fact that they didn't want the furore ahead of the local elections. They perhaps worried that it might lead to Neil having to resign and therefore having a by-election in the southwest of England where they're worried about the Liberal Democrat threat. I suspect all of those calculations probably accounted for the delay. And it is time that principles came ahead of political convenience. I think it's far more important that Parliament and the Conservative Party sorts these matters out. And they can only do that really by putting the principles ahead of party political
There is an argument, sorry to interrupt you, but we haven't got much time left. There is an argument that, the culture comes from the top, which we've heard a lot in recent months about separate issues. The chair of the Equalities Committee, Caroline Noakes, says the party is institutionally sexist. Denied, of course. Do you think she is right?
Yes, I do, predominantly. Yes, I do. I think I want to pay tribute to the many men in the Conservative Party who are not sexist and are respectful of women and work well with women. There are many, but I'm afraid there are too many who are not. And I agree with Caroline Noakes and what she said.
Margot James, sorry to cut you off there, but thanks very much for talking to us this evening.
Thank you.